I had always trusted my girlfriend, Claire, or at least I thought I did. We had been together for over 2 years, and our relationship felt stable. One evening she sat me down with a serious expression, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It's just old feelings," she said. "I need closure with him." I nodded, forcing a calm tone. "Okay," I replied, though a knot of unease formed in my stomach. Claire smiled faintly, perhaps relieved at my willingness to accept it. I, on the other hand, had begun to consider what closure really meant, and whether I was ready to witness it. The next day she left early, claiming she would meet him for coffee. I stayed home, trying not to let jealousy or anxiety take over. Hours passed. I checked my phone more times than I cared to admit, but there were no messages or calls. I reminded myself that trust was part of a healthy relationship. When Claire returned, she seemed unusually quiet, contemplative even. I asked her about the meeting, and she avoided my gaze. "It was different than I expected," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. I felt a twinge of worry but didn't press her. Instead, I waited for her to explain further. She eventually admitted that old emotions had resurfaced, sentiments she hadn't fully processed before our relationship began. I listened, carefully balancing my own feelings with hers. I realized this wasn't about betrayal, it was about understanding the past. Claire told me she had spent the meeting reflecting on what she had learned and why she had moved on. "I just needed to see him and be honest with myself," she explained. "It doesn't change us. It doesn't change what we have." I appreciated her honesty but felt an unexpected surge of clarity in myself as well. I realized that trust also involves understanding, even when it's uncomfortable. Over the next week, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior, a renewed warmth, a sense of relief, and genuine attention to our time together. I reflected on my initial reaction, recognizing that saying, "okay," had been the right choice, though it had required restraint and patience. Claire and I began to talk more openly about boundaries, emotions, and what closure truly meant in the context of our relationship. We both realized that unresolved past relationships could linger in subtle ways but didn't have to threaten the present. Through these conversations, I discovered a depth of empathy and understanding I hadn't fully accessed before. Claire appreciated my calmness and willingness to let her handle her emotions independently while remaining supportive. The experience strengthened our communication skills and reinforced our trust, showing us both that honesty matters more than avoidance. I also reflected on my own past, realizing that closure isn't only for others, it's also for oneself. Claire and I established new practices for transparency, checking in about emotions without judgment or pressure. We continued our relationship with a renewed sense of partnership, acknowledging that difficulties are part of growth. Over time, the anxiety I had felt initially faded, replaced by respect for Claire's self-awareness and decision-making. We laughed together more freely, shared thoughts more openly, and navigated challenges with patience rather than defensiveness. I realized that being okay with discomfort, especially when it's rooted in trust, can actually strengthen a relationship. Claire no longer seemed burdened by old memories, and I felt a sense of relief that honesty had prevented lingering resentment. We took walks, shared meals, and had long conversations about our future, building connection based on understanding rather than assumption. The experience reminded me that love is not about control but about support, even when emotions are messy. I learned that stepping back, listening, and trusting someone's intentions can transform potential conflict into growth. Claire expressed gratitude repeatedly, noting that my willingness to accept her need for closure had allowed her to move forward fully. I felt a quiet pride in my ability to respond calmly, balancing my feelings with hers. Months later, we revisited the conversation, acknowledging the challenge it had posed and how it had ultimately deepened our bond. We both realized that past relationships do not define current ones unless allowed to fester in secrecy. By embracing honesty and openness, we built resilience in our partnership, preparing us for future challenges. Claire and I celebrated our anniversary with reflection, recognizing the personal growth each of us had experienced. I understood that trust involves patience, empathy, and occasionally stepping aside while still being present. Our relationship continued to flourish, strengthened by the lessons of that brief but intense period of emotional navigation. I realized that sometimes saying, "okay," is the bravest thing you can do. It shows trust, restraint, and commitment. Claire and I often joked about the incident, acknowledging the awkwardness but appreciating the growth it spurred. We continued building our lives together, grounded in communication, empathy, and mutual respect. I never forgot the lesson. Supporting someone through their emotional process does not weaken love, it can reinforce it. Even now, I look back and feel proud that I allowed space for honesty, rather than letting fear dictate my actions.